8-year-old Ethan Miller refused to change for gym class every day. When school nurse Sarah Thompson discovered the horrifying reason why, she risked everything to save him from a nightmare no one believed existed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning light streamed through the windows of Oakridge Elementary School's health office, casting warm rectangles across the neatly organized desk where Sarah Thompson had begun her daily ritual. 13 years as a school nurse had taught her to prepare for anything, from scraped knees to asthma attacks to the occasional stomach bug making its rounds through the classrooms. She checked her supplies, refreshed the ice packs in the small freezer, and reviewed the list of students with medication schedules. Sarah loved her job. Unlike hospital nursing, where patients came and went, she watched children grow year after year, from timid kindergartners to confident fifth graders ready for middle school. She knew their allergies, their chronic conditions, their family situations. More importantly, she had developed what her colleagues called a sixth sense, an intuitive ability to tell when something wasn't right with a child, even before symptoms became obvious. That sense had been quietly nagging her for weeks about Ethan Miller, a new third grader who had transferred to Oakridge after winter break. Ethan was a slight boy with sandy brown hair that always seemed to fall into his eyes. Quiet, polite, with good grades according to his teacher, yet something about him had caught Sarah's attention from his first visit to her office with a headache 3 weeks ago. It wasn't anything she could document in his health record, just small things. How he flinched when she reached for the thermometer, the way his eyes darted to the door whenever someone walked past, how he held himself so still while she checked. His temperature, as if movement might trigger something unpleasant. Today marked the 5th Monday in a row that Robert Chen, the PE teacher, had sent Ethan to her office. He's refusing to change into gym clothes again, Mr. Chen explained in his note. Says he feels sick. School policy requires a nurse's verification for repeated PE exemptions. Sarah glanced at the clock. 9:15 a.m., just after the 3rd grade. PE period began. Right on schedule, a soft knock sounded at her door. "Come in," she called, arranging her features into a welcoming smile. Ethan Miller entered, his small frame almost hidden behind the door before he fully stepped inside. He wore the same clothes as always, a long-sleeved shirt despite the warm spring temperatures, loose jeans, and sneakers that looked a size too large. "Hi there, Ethan," Sarah said gently. "Mr. Chen sent you to see me again?" The boy nodded, eyes fixed on the floor tiles. "I don't feel good. My stomach hurts." Sarah had heard this same complaint for 5 consecutive Mondays, always during PE, never at any other time. "I'm sorry to hear that. Why don't you have a seat on the exam table and I'll take a look?" Ethan hesitated, then slowly climbed onto the paper-covered table, his movements careful and measured, as if he was avoiding pulling or stretching his clothes in any way. "Can you show me where your stomach hurts?" Sarah asked. Ethan vaguely gestured toward his midsection without touching it. "Just everywhere. I think I might throw up if I run." Sarah performed her usual assessment. Temperature normal, no visible signs of illness, no reported vomiting or diarrhea at home, just like every Monday before. "Ethan," she said carefully, "I notice you've been missing PE quite a lot lately. Is there something about gym class that bothers you?" The boy's shoulders tensed visibly. "No, I just get sick on Mondays." "Only on Mondays?" Sarah asked. "And only during PE time?" Ethan's eyes remained downcast. "I guess. Is it changing? Clothes that you don't like?" Some kids feel uncomfortable changing in front of others. A nearly imperceptible flinch crossed Ethan's face at the word changing. "Mr. Chen mentioned you never change into your gym uniform," Sarah continued. "Everyone needs to change for safety reasons, but maybe we could find a private place for you to change if that would help." Ethan's fingers gripped the edge of the exam table. "I can't change," he whispered. "You can't? Why not, sweetheart?" The boy remained silent, his knuckles white against the blue vinyl of the table. Sarah tried another approach. "Does something hurt when you try to change your clothes?" Ethan's breathing quickened slightly, but he shook his head. "Ethan, I'm here to help you," Sarah said, kneeling to eye level with the seated boy. "But I can only help if I know what's wrong. Is there a reason you can't change your clothes for gym?" Finally, Ethan spoke so softly Sarah had to lean closer to hear. "Mom says I'm not allowed to. It's a family rule." Sarah paused, parsing this unexpected response. "Your mom doesn't want you to change for gym class. Did she send a note about this?" "No notes," Ethan replied. "Just not supposed to let anyone see. It's private." A warning bell sounded in Sarah's mind. "What's private, Ethan?" The boy's eyes darted to the door, then back to the floor. "I have to go back to class. Now, can I have a note for Mr. Chen?" Sarah wanted to press further, but recognized the wall going up. 13 years of nursing had taught her when to push and when to step back. "Of course," she said, writing the excuse note. "But Ethan, I'd like to talk to your mum about this. It's important that everyone participates in PE. It's part of your education." Ethan took the note with a small nod and slipped out of the office, his two big sneakers squeaking slightly on the polished hallway floor. Sarah sat at her desk, tapping her pen against her notepad. Something wasn't adding up. A family rule against changing clothes for gym. She'd heard many unusual family restrictions over the years, everything from religious dress codes to germophobia. But this seemed different. Combined with Ethan's physical wariness and his recent transfer mid-year, the situation raised questions she couldn't ignore. She opened Ethan's enrollment file on her computer. Mother, Jessica Miller. Father, not listed. Emergency contact, Michael Miller, stepfather. Phone numbers, address in the newer subdivision across town. Previous school listed as Westfield Elementary, about 40 miles away. A note indicated the family had moved due to Michael's job in construction management. Nothing unusual in the health records. Vaccinations up to date, no allergies or medical conditions noted. Sarah picked up her phone and dialed Jessica Miller's cell number. "Hello?" A woman's voice answered, sounding rushed. "Mrs. Miller? This is Sarah Thompson, the school nurse at Oakridge Elementary. I'm calling about Ethan." A pause. "Is he sick? Do I need to pick him up?" "No, he's fine," Sarah assured her. "But I wanted to discuss something with you. Ethan has been missing PE classes because he says he can't change into gym clothes. He mentioned it's a family rule." The silence that followed lasted just a beat too long. "Oh, that?" Jessica's voice shifted to a nervous laugh. "Ethan misunderstood. We've been trying to teach him modesty. You know how boys can be. He thinks that means he can't change at school. But that's not what we meant at all." "I see," Sarah said, noting the discrepancy between Ethan's certainty and his mother's explanation. "So you're okay with him changing for gym class?" "Of course," Jessica replied quickly. "I'll talk to him tonight and clear this up. Thank you for letting me know. Mrs. Miller, while I have you on the phone, I noticed Ethan transferred mid-year. How is he adjusting to Oakridge?" Another pause. "Fine. The move was sudden with Michael's job, but kids adapt quickly, don't they? Is there a problem with his schoolwork?" "No, his academics are fine," Sarah assured her. "I just like to check in with parents of transfer students. Sometimes the transition can be challenging." "We're all doing fine," Jessica said, her voice taking on an edge. "Was there anything else?" "No, that's all. Thank you for your time, Mrs. Miller." After ending the call, Sarah made detailed notes. The conversation had done nothing to ease her concerns. In fact, just the opposite. Jessica Miller's explanations felt rehearsed, her tone shifting from worry to defensiveness too quickly. And there was something in her voice when she mentioned her husband that Sarah couldn't quite place. The next morning, Sarah kept an eye out for Ethan in the hallway before classes began. She spotted him walking alongside his friend Jake, the two boys talking animatedly about a video game. When Ethan noticed her watching, his demeanor instantly changed. Shoulders hunching, eyes down, conversation stopped. The transformation was so sudden, it was as if someone had flipped a switch. That afternoon, Mr. Chen stopped by her office during his planning period. "Just wanted to update you on the Miller kid," he said, leaning against her doorframe. "His mom sent an email saying he's allowed to change for gym, but he still refused today. I didn't push it because, honestly, something seems off. Thought you should know." Sarah thanked him for the information. "Did he give a reason today?" "Said he forgot his gym clothes, but when I offered him a spare set from the lost and found, he nearly panicked. Then he complained about his stomach again, so I sent him to the library instead of your office. Didn't want to bother you twice in 2 days with the same issue." After Mr. Chen left, Sarah found herself staring at Ethan's file again. Her instincts were screaming that something was wrong, but she had nothing concrete, just a boy who wouldn't change his clothes and a mother with a suspicious explanation. On Thursday morning, fate intervened in the form of a playground accident. Sarah was summoned to the blacktop where Ethan sat clutching his arm, tears streaming down his face. He had fallen while playing basketball, landing hard on his right side. "I think we should check if anything's broken," Sarah told him, helping him to his feet. "Can you walk to my office?" In her health room, Sarah preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Carefully examined the arm, relieved to find no obvious signs of fracture, no deformity, limited swelling. But a proper assessment required seeing the injury clearly. "Ethan, I need to roll up your sleeve to check your arm properly. Is that okay?" The boy immediately stiffened. "No, it's not that bad. I'm fine now. I really need to see if there's any bruising or swelling," Sarah explained gently. "I'll be very careful." "Please don't," Ethan whispered, his eyes filling with fresh tears. Sarah considered her options. The injury didn't appear severe enough to force the issue, but his reaction was concerning enough that she couldn't simply let it go. "Ethan, I'm worried about why you don't want me to see your arm. Is there something there you don't want me to see?" The boy remained silent, his uninjured arm wrapped protectively around the hurt one. "You know," Sarah said conversationally, "part of my job is to help kids stay safe, not just from germs or accidents, but from all kinds of things that might hurt them. Sometimes that includes things that happen at home." Ethan's eyes darted to her face, then away. "If someone is hurting you, Ethan, I can help, but only if you let me." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant sounds of children playing outside. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice so quiet Sarah had to lean forward to hear. "If I show you, will I have to go home today?" The question sent a chill through Sarah's spine. "No, not if home isn't safe." Slowly, with trembling fingers, Ethan rolled up his sleeve, revealing what Sarah had feared but hoped not to find, a pattern of bruises in various stages of healing, some yellowing with age, others the deep purple of recent injury. More disturbing were the small circular marks that could only be cigarette burns, at least 5 visible on his forearm alone. Sarah kept her expression neutral with the practiced control of a medical professional, though inside she felt physically ill. "Thank you for showing me, Ethan. That was very brave. Does your other arm look similar?" A small nod. "And under your clothes? Is that why you don't want to change for gym?" Another nod, tears spilling silently down his cheeks. "Who did this to you, Ethan?" The boy's voice cracked. "Dad, I mean Michael, Mom's husband. He says it's discipline when I break the rules. but sometimes I don't know what rule I broke until after. Sarah pulled her desk chair closer, sitting at eye level with Ethan. This isn't discipline, Ethan. This is abuse, and it's not your fault. No one has the right to hurt you like this, no matter what rules you might break. He says if I tell anyone, they'll take me away from Mom, and she'll be all alone with him. Ethan's voice shook, and he'll find me anyway. He always finds out everything. That's not true, Sarah assured him, though she knew such threats were common from abusers. There are people whose entire job is to keep children safe from adults who hurt them. Like police? Ethan asked skeptically. Yes, and others. Too, special social workers and judges. Sarah paused, considering her next steps carefully. Ethan, I need to take some pictures of your injuries and make a report. This is very serious. Fear flashed across the boy's face. He'll know I told. He won't, Sarah promised, though she couldn't be entirely sure. And you won't be going home to him today. That's a promise. As she documented Ethan's injuries with her medical camera, cataloging each bruise and burn with clinical detachment, Sarah's mind raced through protocols and procedures. As a mandated reporter, her duty was clear. Contact Child Protective Services immediately. But experience had taught her that the system sometimes moved slowly, and children could fall through bureaucratic cracks. After bandaging Ethan's arm from the playground fall, she walked him to the counselor's office, explaining that Hannah Reed would sit with him while she made some important calls. The boy looked terrified, but nodded bravely. Back in her office, Sarah first called CPS, providing detailed information about Ethan's injuries and his disclosure. The intake worker assured her someone would be assigned immediately, but warned it might take several hours for a caseworker to arrive. Next, she called Principal Davis, who came directly to her office. I've documented everything, Sarah explained, showing Dr. Davis the photographs. CPS is sending someone, but in the meantime, we need to keep Ethan here. He can't go home to that house. Dr. Davis frowned, studying the images. This is clearly severe abuse. Does the mother know we've discovered this? Not yet. Ethan says she knows about the abuse, but is afraid of the stepfather herself. We should contact the police as well, Dr. Davis decided. This level of injury warrants criminal charges. When Officer James Wilson arrived, he reviewed the evidence. With the grave demeanor of someone who had seen such cases before, but never became desensitized to them. I'll need to interview the boy, he said, and we'll need to coordinate with CPS on how to handle the parents. The stepfather can't know we're investigating until we're ready to make an arrest, or he might flee or destroy evidence. The CPS caseworker, a woman named Diane Foster, arrived shortly after, and together with Officer Wilson, they developed a plan. Ethan would be placed in emergency foster care while they built their case. They would interview Jessica Miller separately from her husband, hoping she might cooperate if approached alone. When school ended, Ethan stayed in the counselor's office, told only that arrangements were being made to keep him safe. Sarah sat with him, helping him with homework to maintain a sense of normalcy amid the chaos unfolding around him. Where will I sleep tonight? He finally asked, setting down his pencil. With a family who specializes in helping kids in emergency situations, Sarah explained. They have a comfortable house with a room just for kids who need a safe place to stay. Will Jake know what happened? Ethan asked, referring to his friend. No, honey. This is private, medical information that we keep confidential, just like when someone has any other medical condition. Ethan seemed to consider this. Michael says men don't cry or show weakness. That's why he has to toughen me up. His voice was matter of fact, repeating what had clearly been drilled into him. Sarah felt a surge of anger toward the man who had twisted this child's understanding of strength and masculinity. Real strength isn't about hiding pain or hurting others, she said carefully. It's about kindness and standing up for what's right, like you did today. As evening approached, CPS had secured an emergency placement and a temporary custody order from a judge. Officer Wilson had interviewed Jessica Miller at her workplace, away from her husband's watchful eye. According to his update to Sarah, the woman had broken down immediately, admitting she knew about the abuse but felt powerless to stop it. She's willing to cooperate completely, Officer Wilson told Sarah. Says she's been trying to figure out how to leave him for months, but was afraid he'd kill her if she tried. Unfortunately, her testimony confirms this has been ongoing since before they moved here. The previous school was starting to ask questions, which is why they relocated. What happens now? Sarah asked. We're arresting Michael Miller tonight. Jessica will stay in a domestic violence shelter temporarily. She's given us detailed information about other potential evidence in the home, and we've secured a search warrant. When it was time for Ethan to leave with the CPS worker, he turned to Sarah with unexpected composure. Will you be here tomorrow? Absolutely, she promised. Same office, same time. Okay, he nodded, something like hope flickering in his eyes. I think maybe I'd like to try playing in gym class sometime, when these go away. He gestured to his hidden injuries. You'll have plenty of time for that, Sarah assured him, one day at a time. 3 months later, Sarah sat in the back of a courtroom as Michael Miller pleaded guilty to multiple counts of child abuse, accepting a plea deal that would keep him imprisoned for at least 8 years. Jessica Miller, after completing intensive therapy and parenting classes, had been granted supervised visitation with Ethan, who was thriving in a foster home with experienced caregivers. The most remarkable change was in Ethan himself. Sarah saw him daily at school, watching his gradual transformation from a withdrawn, fearful child to one who laughed with friends and participated enthusiastically in all activities, including PE, where he now proudly changed into his gym uniform. On the last day of school, Ethan stopped by Sarah's office, not because he needed medical attention, but to deliver a handmade card. Inside, in careful third-grade handwriting, he had written, "Thank you for seeing what was hiding under my sleeves when nobody else did." Sarah Thompson had helped many children over her 13 years as a school nurse, bandaging wounds, dispensing medications, checking temperatures. But as she watched Ethan run across the playground to join his friends, wearing a short-sleeved shirt for the first time, she was reminded why she had become a nurse in the first place. Sometimes the most important things to heal were the injuries no one could see. The following September, Oakridge Elementary implemented a new training program for all staff on recognizing signs of child abuse, inspired by Ethan's case. Sarah led the sessions, emphasizing the importance of noticing patterns, trusting instincts, and being the adult who asks the difficult questions when something doesn't seem right. Children can't always tell us they're in danger, she explained to a room full of teachers, administrators, and support staff. Sometimes the only voice they have is in their behavior, in what they do and don't do, in what they can and can't. You say, it's our job to listen to those unspoken words and be brave enough to act on what we hear. In the front row, Principal Davis nodded in agreement. The Ethan Miller case had transformed not just one child's life, but had awakened an entire school community to its collective responsibility. Outside the window, children played freely on the playground, their laughter carrying on the autumn breeze. Among them was Ethan, now in 4th grade, racing across the blacktop in short sleeves, his arms no longer bearing the marks of abuse, just the natural scrapes and bruises of an active child living without fear. Sarah smiled at the sight. In a world that sometimes seemed overwhelmed by darkness, there was something profoundly hopeful about a boy who could now change his clothes without shame, who could raise his hand in class without flinching, who could simply be a child again. Sometimes the most important healing began with someone noticing what others had missed, like a school nurse who wondered why a boy wouldn't change for gym class and refused to accept the easy answers. The faculty lounge at Oakridge Elementary buzzed with mid-morning conversation as Sarah Thompson stirred her tea, her mind still focused on Ethan Miller. The boy's refusal to change for gym class had evolved from a minor behavioral issue into something that kept her awake at night. 13 years in school, nursing had taught her to trust her instincts, and every professional alarm bell was ringing. "You've got that look again," said Hannah Reed, the school counselor, sliding into the chair opposite Sarah. "The one where you're solving problems instead of drinking your tea?" Sarah smiled faintly at her colleague and friend. "That obvious, huh? Only to people who've known you longer than a semester," Hannah replied, unwrapping her lunch. "Which student is it this time?" "Ethan Miller, 3rd grade, Mrs. Peterson's class," Sarah said, keeping her voice low despite the general din of the lounge. "Transfer student from Westfield Elementary about 3 months ago." Hannah nodded in recognition. "Quiet kid, sandy hair, usually hangs around with Jake Stevens. I've seen him in the hallway but haven't had any direct contact." "That's him. He's been refusing to change for PE for 5 weeks straight. Always claims stomach problems, always only on gym days." "Could be anxiety," Hannah suggested thoughtfully. "Some kids develop specific phobias about changing in front of others. Body image issues start younger than people realize." Sarah considered this. "I thought so too initially, but when I offered accommodations, private changing space, modified, and participation, he said it was a family rule that he couldn't change at school." Hannah's eyebrows rose slightly. "Religious reasons, maybe." "That's what I thought, so I called his mother. She claimed Ethan misunderstood their teachings about modesty, but her explanation felt—" Sarah searched for the right word. "Rehearsed. Almost scripted." "And your nurse sense is tingling," Hannah concluded with a small smile, though her eyes remained serious. Before Sarah could respond, Dr. Karen Davis, Oakridge's principal, approached their table. Tall and impeccably dressed as always, she carried the perpetual air of someone with too many meetings scheduled in too few hours. "Sarah, do you have a moment?" she asked, her tone pleasant, but clearly indicating this wasn't really a request. "Of course," Sarah replied, gathering her half-eaten lunch and following Dr. Davis to a quieter corner of the lounge. "I received a somewhat concerning call from Michael Miller this morning," Dr. Davis began once they were seated. "He's Ethan, Miller's stepfather. He says you've been singling out his son with repeated medical examinations and phone calls home." Sarah felt a chill run through her. "I wouldn't characterize it that way. Ethan has been coming to my office every gym day complaining of stomach pains. As per school policy, I've been documenting these visits and following up appropriately." Dr. Davis studied her carefully. "Mr. Miller seemed to think you were suggesting there might be problems at home. He was quite upset." "I made no such suggestion," Sarah said carefully. "I simply asked his mother about the family rule Ethan mentioned regarding changing for gym class." "Family rule?" Dr. Davis frowned. "Yes. When I asked why he wouldn't change clothes, he said it was a family rule that he wasn't allowed to. His mother later said he misunderstood their teachings about modesty." Dr. Davis tapped her fingers thoughtfully on the table. "The Millers are new to our district. Michael Miller is apparently some kind of project manager for the development company building those new luxury homes across town. Significant taxpayers." Sarah kept her expression neutral, though internally she bristled at the implication. "With all due respect, Dr. Davis, my medical concerns for students don't factor in their parents' tax brackets." A ghost of a smile crossed the principal's face. "No, and that's precisely why you're excellent at your job, Sarah. I'm just providing context." She sighed. Mr. Miller also mentioned that they had issues with staff at Ethan's previous school asking invasive questions. He was quite adamant that they wouldn't tolerate similar treatment here. "That's interesting," Sarah said, filing away this new information. "Did he specify what kind of questions?" "No, but he made it clear that if his son says he has a stomachache, we should simply excuse him from activities and not probe further." Dr. Davis leaned forward slightly. "Look, Sarah, I know you care deeply about our students, but we need to be careful about how we approach sensitive family matters. If the Millers have religious or cultural practices regarding modesty, we need to respect that." "Of course," Sarah agreed. "But as the school nurse, I also need to ensure that a student repeatedly missing physical education for medical complaints receives proper assessment. It's literally my job." Dr. Davis nodded. "Just tread carefully, please. Document everything. If you have legitimate medical concerns, follow protocols, but perhaps hold off on more calls home about this specific issue for now." After Dr. Davis left, Sarah remained at the table, her appetite gone. The principal hadn't explicitly told her to back off, but the message was clear enough. What troubled her more was Michael Miller's preemptive complaint. Why would a parent be so concerned about questions regarding a simple dress code issue unless there was something to hide? Even more concerning was the mention of issues at Ethan's previous school. Sarah made a mental note to see if she could contact the nurse at Westfield Elementary. Professional courtesy might allow for an unofficial conversation about a transferred student with ongoing health concerns. As she gathered her things to return to her office, Robert Chen, the PE teacher, caught her attention from across the room. He held up a finger in the universal 1-minute gesture and made his way toward her. "Glad I caught you," he said, his usually cheerful face serious. "Just had Ethan in class again. Same story. Wouldn't change. Claimed stomach pains. But something else happened today." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. "What?" We were playing dodgeball, and even though he was sitting out, one of the softer balls rolled and hit his leg. Not hard, just a tap really. But Sarah, the kid reacted like he'd been burned. Jumped up, almost crying, then immediately tried to hide his reaction. Chen shook his head. "I've seen kids with sports injuries before, but this was different. When I asked if he was okay, he just kept saying, 'I'm fine,' over and over, like he was afraid I'd check." Sarah absorbed this information, her concern deepening. "Did you see any visible injury?" "No, but he was wearing those baggy jeans he always has on. Look, I'm not jumping to conclusions, but—" Chen lowered his voice. "My sister's a social worker, and I've heard enough stories to know when something doesn't add up. Thanks for telling me, Robert. I'll keep an eye on him." As she walked back to her office, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. If Ethan was being abused, every day she waited to act was another day he suffered. But if she was wrong and pushed too hard, she could create unnecessary trauma for the family and potentially face professional consequences herself. Back in her office, Sarah pulled out Ethan's file again, reviewing every note she'd made about his visits. A pattern emerged when she looked at the dates. His complaints always intensified on Mondays and after school holidays, then gradually decreased as the week progressed. That could suggest weekend incidents at home. Sarah's desk phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. "Health Office Nurse Thompson speaking." "Sarah, this is Jessica Miller, Ethan's mom." The woman's voice sounded tense. "I just wanted to apologize for my husband calling Dr. Davis this morning. He can be protective." Sarah sat up straighter, surprised by the call. "I appreciate that, Mrs. Miller. I assure you I'm only concerned about Ethan's consistent stomach complaints during physical education." "I know, and I've talked to him about that." Jessica's voice lowered slightly. "He gets anxious sometimes. It's been hard with the move and everything." Something in Jessica's tone caught Sarah's attention, an undercurrent of fear or hesitation. Moving can be stressful for children, she agreed, keeping her tone conversational. How has Ethan been adjusting otherwise? A pause. Fine. He's fine. I should go. I'm at work and shouldn't really be calling. I just wanted you to know I'll make sure Ethan participates in gym class from now on. Mrs. Miller, Sarah said quickly, before the woman could hang up. If there's ever anything you want to discuss about Ethan, my door is always open for all parents. Another pause, longer this time. Thank you. The words came out almost as a whisper before the line went dead. Sarah set the receiver down slowly, replaying the conversation in her mind. Jessica Miller had called specifically to apologize for her husband's behavior, something most parents wouldn't feel necessary. Was she afraid of how Sarah might perceive the family after Michael's complaint? Or was she trying to reach out in some way she couldn't articulate directly? The afternoon passed with the usual parade of minor ailments and medication distributions. Sarah kept expecting Ethan to appear in her doorway, as he often did after lunch. But today, he didn't come. Whether that was because he was feeling better or because his stepfather had instructed him to avoid the nurse's office, she couldn't know. At the end of the school day, Sarah made a decision. She walked to Mrs. Peterson's third-grade classroom, arriving just as the students were packing up for dismissal. "Do you have a moment?" she asked the teacher as children bustled around them, stuffing papers into backpacks and chattering about after-school plans. "For you, always," Mrs. Peterson replied with a warm smile. A veteran teacher with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes, Marilyn Peterson had been at Oakridge for over 20 years. "I wanted to ask about Ethan Miller," Sarah said quietly. "Have you noticed anything concerning in class?" Mrs. Peterson's smile faded slightly as she glanced around to ensure no students were within earshot. "You know, I was going to come talk to you about him. He's a bright child. His academic work is actually above grade level, but socially, he's withdrawn, and physically..." She hesitated. "Physically?" Sarah prompted. "He moves like someone much older. Careful, like he's anticipating pain. I've taught long enough to recognize when a child is carrying something heavy, whether it's physical or emotional." Mrs. Peterson sighed. "And there are days when he seems to have trouble sitting comfortably. I've offered him cushions, thinking maybe the chairs are too hard, but he always declines." Sarah nodded, filing away this new information. "What about his interactions with other students?" "He has a friendship with Jake Stevens. They sit together at lunch and play together at recess. But he doesn't join larger groups, and I've noticed he avoids physical games." Mrs. Peterson lowered her voice further. "Sarah, is there something I should know as his teacher?" Sarah chose her words carefully. "I'm gathering information at this point. Ethan has been coming to me regularly with complaints that allow him to avoid changing for PE. There are some inconsistencies in his explanations and his family's responses that concern me. Understanding passed between the two women, the unspoken language of professionals who had seen too many children suffering in silence. "If there's anything I can do," Mrs. Peterson offered. "Actually, there is. Could you keep a log of any unusual behaviors or comments? Anything that seems off, even if it seems small in isolation? And maybe find opportunities to check in with him one-on-one when it won't seem obvious." "Of course," Mrs. Peterson agreed without hesitation. "I've already been keeping some notes, honestly. Teacher's instinct." As they spoke, movement in the hallway caught Sarah's attention. Michael Miller stood by the main entrance, scanning the corridor with an intensity that seemed out of place for routine school pickup. He was taller than Sarah had imagined from phone conversations, broad-shouldered with closely cropped dark hair and an expensive-looking watch that glinted under the fluorescent lights. Something about his posture, rigid, controlled, watchful, sent an involuntary chill through her. "Is that Ethan's stepfather?" she asked quietly. Mrs. Peterson glanced over. "Yes, that's Michael Miller. He doesn't usually do pickup. It's normally Jessica or the after-school program." As if feeling their eyes on him, Michael turned his gaze toward them. His expression remained neutral, but there was something assessing in his stare that made Sarah instinctively straighten her spine. She offered a professional nod of acknowledgement, which he returned after a beat too long. When Ethan emerged from the bathroom down the hall and saw his stepfather, Sarah observed a subtle but unmistakable transformation. The boy's gait changed, his shoulders drawing inward, his face emptying of expression. It reminded Sarah of soldiers, snapping to attention, a physical response born of training and consequences. "I see what you mean," Mrs. Peterson murmured. "Watch how he walks now." Ethan approached his stepfather with small, careful steps, stopping at precisely the distance where Michael could place a hand on his shoulder without having to reach, something that appeared to have been rehearsed many times. The man leaned down, saying something in Ethan's ear that made the boy nod rapidly, his eyes fixed on the floor. As they left, Michael placed his hand on the back of Ethan's neck, a gesture that might appear affectionate to casual observers, but struck Sarah as oddly controlling, like a puppeteer guiding a marionette. "He's only been picking Ethan up for about 2 weeks," Mrs. Peterson said once they were gone. "I've never seen Jessica at the same time as Michael, now that I think about it." Sarah absorbed this information, adding it to her growing mental file. "Thank you, Marilyn. I should go. I have some calls to make before I leave today." Back in her office, Sarah closed the door and pulled out her personal cell phone. Using the school's resources to investigate a family might be frowned upon, especially after Michael's complaint to the principal, but nothing prevented her from making a personal call to a professional colleague on her own time. Sarah had met Nancy Winters, the school nurse at Westfield Elementary, at various county health coordinator meetings over the years. Though they weren't close friends, they shared the bond of nurses who specialized in pediatric school health. Nancy answered on the third ring. "Nancy, it's Sarah Thompson from Oakridge Elementary. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "Sarah, no, not at all. Just finishing up paperwork. What can I do for you?" Sarah took a deep breath. "I'm calling about a student who transferred from your school to ours a few months ago. Ethan Miller? I'm encountering some health concerns and wondered if you had any insights from his time at Westfield." A pause followed, so lengthy that Sarah wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, Nancy spoke, her voice noticeably lower. "I'm not officially supposed to discuss this." Sarah's pulse quickened. "I understand the confidentiality concerns, but if there's a pattern of medical issues—" "Not on the phone," Nancy interrupted. "Are you free to meet for coffee tomorrow after school? The Cornerstone Cafe on Maple Street. It's halfway between our districts." "Yes, I can be there by 4:30. "Good. And Sarah, come alone." The call ended, leaving Sarah staring at her phone with growing alarm. Nancy's reaction confirmed her worst fears. Something had happened at Westfield, something serious enough that an experienced school nurse was unwilling to discuss it over the phone, but felt compelled to share in person. Sarah gathered her belongings, her mind racing. She needed to document everything properly, follow protocols, build a case that would withstand scrutiny, especially given Michael Miller's apparent status in the community and his preemptive complaint to Dr. Davis. As she locked her office door, Sarah noticed a small figure hovering near the water fountain in the otherwise empty hallway. Jake Stevens, Ethan's friend, seemed to be waiting for someone despite dismissal having ended 20 minutes earlier. "Jake, is everything okay? Do you need help with something?" The boy startled slightly, then approached with obvious hesitation. "Ms. Thompson? You're the nurse, right?" "That's right," Sarah confirmed with an encouraging smile. "Did you need something for a stomachache or a bandage? Jake shook his head, glancing nervously down the empty hallway before speaking. "It's about Ethan. He made me promise not to tell anyone. But my mom says sometimes promises don't count. If someone might get hurt." Sarah knelt to Jake's level, careful to maintain a professional but approachable demeanor. "That's a very mature way to think about promises, Jake. What is it about Ethan that has you concerned?" "Yesterday at recess, we were playing on the monkey bars, and his shirt came up a little bit." Jake demonstrated by lifting the hem of his own shirt slightly. "He has these big purple marks all over his back and sides. When I asked what happened, he said he fell down the stairs, but then later he said he fell off his bike." Jake's face screwed up in confusion. "You can't do both, right? I think he was lying, but I don't know why." Sarah kept her expression neutral, despite the alarm bells clanging in her mind. "You're right that those sound like different accidents. Thank you for telling me, Jake. You did exactly the right thing." "Am I in trouble?" Jake asked anxiously. "Ethan made me swear not to tell. He said bad things would happen if anyone found out." "You're not in trouble at all," Sarah assured him. "Sometimes being a good friend means getting help when someone needs it, even if they don't want you to. Did Ethan say what bad things would happen?" Jake shifted uncomfortably. "He said his stepdad would get really mad and then they'd have to move again, and I'd never see him anymore." The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity, the pattern of moving when questions arose, the control Michael Miller exerted, the physical symptoms Mrs. Peterson had observed, Ethan's refusal to change clothes. "Jake, I promise you that you've done nothing wrong. In fact, you've been an incredibly brave and good friend. I'm going to help make sure Ethan is safe." After walking Jake to the after-school program, where his mother would pick him up later, Sarah returned to her office and closed the door. With shaking hands, she dialed the child abuse hotline number she knew by heart as a mandated reporter. "This is Sarah Thompson, school nurse at Oakridge Elementary," she said when the operator answered. "I need to report suspected physical abuse of an 8-year-old student." The intake worker took down the details methodically, Ethan's name and address, the observations that had led to Sarah's concerns, the statements from other staff members, and from Jake. When Sarah mentioned the family's history of moving when questions arose at the previous school, the worker made note of this as a particular red flag. "We'll assign this case immediately," the intake worker assured her. "Given the severity of the concerns and the specific disclosure from the friend, we'll aim to have someone visit the home within 24 to 48 hours. In the meantime, document any new observations, especially if the child comes to school with visible injuries." "What about tomorrow?" Sarah asked. "I'm worried about sending him home for another night." "Unless there are visible acute injuries that constitute an emergency, we have to follow standard procedures," the worker explained. "But I'll flag this as high priority based on the information you've provided." After hanging up, Sarah sat at her desk, staring at the wall of children's thank you cards she'd collected over 13 years of nursing. Colorful drawings and wobbly handwriting from students she'd helped through asthma attacks, broken bones, and stomach flus. The visible, treatable problems. It was the invisible wounds that kept her awake at night. She thought of Ethan returning, home with Michael Miller, the subtle transformation she'd witnessed when the boy saw his stepfather, the careful way he moved, anticipating pain, the terror that kept him silent. Sarah knew the statistics all too well. Reports didn't always lead to immediate action. Investigations could take time. Children sometimes fell through bureaucratic cracks despite everyone's best intentions. And abusers like Michael Miller, intelligent, financially comfortable, respected in the community, were particularly skilled at manipulating the system. As she finally left the building, the weight of responsibility pressed down on Sarah's shoulders. She had done what she was legally required to do by reporting her concerns. But was it enough? Was Ethan safe tonight? Would the system move quickly, enough to protect one small boy with bruises hidden beneath his clothing? Tomorrow, she would meet with Nancy Winters and learn what had happened at Westfield. Tomorrow, she would continue building the case to protect Ethan. Tomorrow, she would watch for new injuries, new signs, new evidence. But tonight, Ethan would sleep in that house, under the same roof as the man who hurt him. Sarah reached her car and sat behind the wheel without starting the engine, trying to quiet the voice inside her that whispered she should have done more, noticed sooner, acted faster. It was the same voice that haunted many professionals who worked with vulnerable children, the constant fear of missing something crucial, of failing the very people they were committed to protecting. "One step at a time," she murmured to herself. Finally turning the key in the ignition, follow the process, document everything. She would be at school early tomorrow, waiting at the entrance where the buses dropped off students, watching for Ethan's arrival, watching for any sign that might tell her how badly her help was needed and how quickly. The parking lot was nearly empty as Sarah drove away from Oakridge Elementary, the setting sun casting long shadows across the playground where children should only have to worry about games and friendships, not survival. In her rearview mirror, the school building grew smaller, but her resolve only strengthened. For children like Ethan, school was often the safest place in their lives, the one place where adults watched and wondered and worried when something wasn't right. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new opportunities to break through the wall of silence surrounding one brave little boy who couldn't change for gym class because of what someone might see. Sarah Thompson had become a school nurse to help children heal. Sometimes that meant bandages and ice packs. Sometimes it meant being the one adult willing to look beyond excuses and evasions to ask the questions no one wanted to answer. Tomorrow couldn't come soon enough. The morning light had barely broken over the horizon when Sarah Thompson pulled into the Oakridge Elementary parking lot. She was 2 hours early for her usual shift, but sleep had proven elusive after yesterday's troubling revelations about Ethan Miller. Setting up her makeshift observation post at a window overlooking the bus drop-off area, Sarah sipped coffee from a travel mug, waiting for the first yellow buses to arrive. Children with stable, loving homes often complained about early school mornings. But Sarah had learned over the years that abused children frequently arrived first. Their homes offered no sanctuary to linger in, no warm embraces to delay departure. She had a feeling Ethan would be among the early arrivals. Her instinct proved correct. The third bus of the morning opened its doors, and Ethan descended the steps with the careful movements that had become his hallmark. Even from a distance, Sarah could see how he scanned his surroundings with the hypervigilance common in traumatized children, not the casual awareness of his peers, but the calculated assessment of someone identifying potential threats and escape routes. Sarah watched as he made his way toward the building, noting how he kept his backpack positioned like a shield against his right side. His gait seemed even more stilted than usual, with a slight favoring of his left leg, precisely where Robert Chen had mentioned the dodgeball had struck him yesterday. When Ethan disappeared into the building, Sarah abandoned her post and made her way through the quiet hallways to intercept him. She found him sitting alone outside his classroom, a book open on his lap, though his eyes weren't moving across the page. "Good morning, Ethan," she said warmly, keeping her tone casual. "You're here bright and early today." The boy's head snapped up, momentary alarm crossing his face before his features settled into the neutral mask she was coming to recognize as his default expression in adult interactions. "Hi, Miss Thompson. Mind if I sit with you for a minute?" she asked, gesturing to the empty space on the bench beside him. Ethan shrugged, the movement almost imperceptible, but shifted slightly to make room. Sarah noticed how he angled his body away from her, the small, unconscious adjustments that minimized potential contact. "I'm an early bird too," she commented, keeping her voice light. "It's so peaceful before everyone arrives, isn't it?" "I guess." Ethan's voice was barely audible. "Michael, my dad, has to be at work early, so he drops me off before he goes to the construction site." Sarah noted his correction from Michael to my dad, the kind of verbal self-editing she'd observed in children who'd been coached on how to refer to adults in their lives. "That makes sense. Does your mum go to work early too?" "Sometimes. She works at Riverside Mall in the department store." Ethan's fingers worried at the corner of his book page. "She has different shifts." "It must be nice to have quiet reading time before school starts," Sarah observed, nodding toward his book, a thick fantasy novel clearly above third-grade reading level. For the first time, a flicker of genuine animation crossed Ethan's face. "I like reading. You can go anywhere in books, be anyone." Then, as if remembering himself, the spark faded. "I mean, it's just something to do." "I was a big reader as a kid too," Sarah said, seizing on this small opening. "Books were like having extra worlds to escape into." Ethan glanced up, a flash of recognition in his eyes at her choice of words. "Escape," before his gaze returned to the floor. Sarah noticed a slight tremor in his hands as he closed his book, his knuckles white against the cover. "Ethan," she said gently, "I noticed you're walking a little differently this morning. Is your leg bothering you from when the ball hit it yesterday?" The boy went perfectly still, the way prey animals freeze when sensing a predator. "It's fine," he said automatically. "Doesn't hurt at all." "You know," Sarah continued conversationally, "part of my job as a nurse is to help when students are injured, even small injuries that might not seem important. If your leg is sore, I could take a look at it in my office." "No!" The word came out sharper than either of them expected, and Ethan immediately backtracked. "I mean, no thank you. It's really nothing. Just a little bruise, probably." Sarah maintained her calm demeanor, despite the alarm bells ringing in her mind. "Bruises can be painful, especially if they're in places where clothing rubs against them. That's why we change into gym clothes for PE, to make sure we're comfortable when we move around." Ethan's breathing quickened slightly, his eyes darting toward the hallway, as if seeking escape. "I have to use the bathroom," he said suddenly, gathering his book and backpack with awkward haste. "Before other kids come." Sarah recognized the retreat for what it was and didn't push further. "Of course. My office is open all day if you change your mind or need anything." As Ethan hurried away, Sarah remained seated, processing their interaction. His extreme reaction to the mention of examining his leg confirmed her suspicions that whatever injuries he was hiding extended beyond what a simple dodgeball impact would cause. The real question was how extensive those injuries might be, and how she could create an opportunity to document them properly. Rising from the bench, Sarah made her way to her office to prepare for the day ahead. She had barely unlocked her door when Hannah Reed appeared in the hallway, a paper coffee cup in each hand. "Thought you might need reinforcements," the counselor said, offering one of the cups. "You left our conversation pretty abruptly yesterday after Dr. Davis pulled you aside. Everything okay?" Sarah ushered Hannah into her office and closed the doctor before responding. "Not really. The Ethan Miller situation has escalated." She quickly summarized the developments: Michael's complaint to the principal, Robert Chen's observations, her conversation with Mrs. Peterson, and her encounter with Ethan just moments ago. Hannah listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly grave. "This definitely fits the pattern for physical abuse," she agreed when Sarah finished. "The hypervigilance, the excuses, the extreme reaction to potential discovery, and the family's history of moving when questions arise is particularly concerning. I've reported it to Child Protective Services," Sarah said, lowering her voice despite the empty hallways. "But you know how these investigations can go, especially when the family is well connected and the child isn't talking. Hannah nodded grimly. I've seen too many cases where nothing happens until a child ends up in the emergency room, or worse. What's your next step? I'm meeting Nancy Winters from Westfield Elementary after school today. She was Ethan's nurse at his previous school, and her reaction when I mentioned him suggests there's history there. Sarah glanced at her watch. And I'm hoping to find a way to properly document any injuries before then. If Ethan has visible bruising, it strengthens the case significantly. I could help with that, Hannah offered. I could request to see him for a standard check-in with new students. We often do social-emotional assessments during their first semester. If I observe something concerning during our session, I can ask you to join us for a medical evaluation. Sarah considered this. That might work. It's less direct than calling him to my office, which might trigger his defenses. I'll arrange it for late morning, Hannah decided. That gives me time to pull the standard new student assessment forms so everything looks routine. As the school day officially began, Sarah went through her normal routine, distributing medications to students on daily regimens, checking in with a fifth grader recovering from asthmatic bronchitis, bandaging a kindergartner's paper cut. All the while, her mind remained preoccupied with Ethan, with the coffee meeting scheduled for that afternoon, and with the weight of responsibility she carried for a child who couldn't speak for himself. Shortly before 11 a.m., her office phone rang. Health office, Nurse Thompson. Sarah, it's Hannah. I've got Ethan Miller in my office for the new student check-in, and I think you should join us. I told him I always partner with the nurse for these assessments to make sure we're supporting the whole child, physical and emotional health together. Sarah recognized the coded message in Hannah's casual tone. I'll be right there. When Sarah entered the counselor's office, she found Ethan perched on the edge of a chair, his posture rigid despite the room's deliberately relaxed atmosphere. Hannah had created a welcoming space with comfortable furniture, gentle lighting, and displays of student artwork, but Ethan sat as if expecting to be ordered to attention at any moment. Hi, Ethan, Sarah greeted him with a warm smile. Ms. Reed and I often work together with students who are new to Oakridge. How are you feeling today? Fine, came the automated response, his eyes fixed on the geometric patterns of the carpet. Hannah gestured for Sarah to take a seat as she continued the conversation. Ethan and I were just talking about his transition to Oakridge. He was telling me about his favorite subjects and how he's made friends with Jake Stevens. Sarah nodded, keeping her body language open and non-threatening. That's wonderful. Friends make a new school feel like home much faster. We were also discussing physical activity, Hannah continued smoothly. Ethan mentioned he hasn't been participating in PE because of stomach problems. Since that falls under your area, I thought you might want to ask a few questions. Sarah recognized the opening Hannah had created. Of course, physical activity is important for growing bodies and minds. Ethan, have your stomach troubles been bothering you less since we last talked? The boy shrugged, a barely perceptible movement. It's okay today. That's good to hear, Sarah said. Sometimes stomach pain can be connected to other issues, injuries, stress, even how we're sleeping. Have you been sleeping well? I guess. His fingers traced invisible patterns on his jeans, never looking up. Hannah leaned forward slightly. Ethan, when Ms. Thompson and I work with students, we sometimes need to check for physical signs that might explain symptoms like stomach pain. Would it be all right if Nurse Thompson took a quick look at your stomach area? It would help us understand if there might be something causing your discomfort. Panic flashed across Ethan's face before he could suppress it. No, I'm feeling better now. I don't need a checkup. Sarah exchanged a glance with Hannah before speaking gently. Ethan, I've noticed you seem to be in pain sometimes, especially when moving or sitting. As the school nurse, it's my job, to make sure students aren't hurting. I'm not, he insisted, his voice rising slightly. I told you I'm fine. Hannah tried another approach. Sometimes when people hurt us, they tell us to keep it a secret. They might say that bad things will happen if we tell anyone, but secrets like that aren't ones we need to keep. Ethan's breathing had become shallow, his eyes darting between the two women and the door. Can I go back to class now? Mrs. Peterson is doing fractions today, and I don't want to miss it. Sarah knew they were losing him. His defenses were fully engaged, and pushing harder might only reinforce his silence. But she couldn't let this opportunity pass completely. Ethan, she said softly, I want you to know something important. If someone is hurting you, anyone, for any reason, it is never your fault, and Ms. Reed and I will help you no matter what. For the briefest moment, Ethan's carefully constructed facade cracked. His eyes, when they finally met Sarah's, contained such a depth of pain and fear that she felt it like a physical blow. You can't help, he whispered, the words barely audible. Nobody can. Before either adult could respond, he bolted from his chair, yanking open the office door and disappearing into the hallway. Hannah moved to follow him, but Sarah placed a restraining hand on her arm. Let him go, she said, her heart heavy. We pushed as far as we safely could today. If we chase him down, we'll only reinforce that he has no control over what happens to him. Hannah sank back into her chair, rubbing her temples. He all but confirmed abuse with that last statement, Sarah. You can't help. Nobody can. That's the voice of a child who's been conditioned to believe that adults who hurt him are more powerful than adults who might protect him. I know. Sarah's voice was tight with controlled emotion. And he's partly right. The system doesn't always work the way it should, especially when abusers are skilled at manipulation and presentation. What about your meeting with the nurse from his previous school? That might give us more leverage. Sarah checked her watch. 4 hours until then. In the meantime, I think we need to document what just happened. His reaction to the suggestion of a physical examination, and especially that final statement, are significant evidence of psychological distress consistent with abuse. Together, they drafted detailed notes of the interaction, careful to distinguish between observed behaviors and their professional interpretations. When they finished, Hannah placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. We're doing everything right. Sarah, following protocols, documenting carefully, involving the proper authorities. Try to remember that. It doesn't feel like enough, Sarah admitted, the professional mask slipping momentarily, not when he's going home to that house every night. The remainder of the school day crawled by with excruciating slowness. Sarah found herself repeatedly checking the clock, willing the minutes to pass more quickly so she could meet Nancy Winters and finally get answers about what had happened at Westfield Elementary. Shortly after the dismissal bell, she observed Michael Miller arriving for pickup earlier than he had the previous day. The man's gaze swept the hallway with the same predatory intensity she'd noted before, lingering briefly on her when she emerged from her office. This time, he approached, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Ms. Thompson, I believe. His voice was smooth, cultured, at odds with the calculated assessment in his stare. I wanted to introduce myself. Michael Miller, Ethan's father. Stepfather, Sarah corrected automatically, then silently cursed herself for the needless antagonism. If Michael was offended, he didn't show it. His smile simply sharpened. Technically, yes, though I've raised him since he was 4. His biological father has never been in the picture. Sarah maintained her professional demeanor. It's nice to meet you, Mr. Miller. Ethan is a bright student. Yes, he is. Very intelligent, though sometimes his imagination gets the better of him. Michael glanced pointedly toward her office door. I understand he's been visiting your office frequently with stomach complaints. That's protected health information, Mr. Miller. But since you're Ethan's guardian, yes, he has reported recurring abdominal discomfort, particularly during physical education. Michael nodded, his expression one of exaggerated concern. He's always been an anxious child. After his mother and I married, he went through a phase of fabricating injuries and illnesses to get attention. His therapist says it's not uncommon in children who experienced early parental abandonment. Sarah noted how skillfully he had planted multiple seeds in a single statement. Ethan as unreliable, previous professional assessment supporting his narrative, and a sympathetic backstory that painted him as the stable father figure. I'm not aware that Ethan is currently seeing a therapist, she replied carefully. That information isn't in his school health records. Something dangerous flickered behind Michael's eyes before his mask of concerned parenthood resumed. We've recently switched providers. I'll have Jessica forward the updated information. That would be helpful, Sarah agreed, watching as Ethan approached from down the hallway, his steps slowing noticeably when he spotted his stepfather talking to the school nurse. Michael turned, extending his arm in what appeared to be a welcoming gesture, but which Ethan clearly recognized as a command. The boy quickened his pace, coming to stand precisely where Michael's hand could rest on his shoulder, a position that looked natural but effectively immobilized him. "Ready to go, buddy?" Michael asked, his voice warmer now that they had an audience of passing students and parents. "How was school today?" "Good," Ethan mumbled, eyes downcast. "Ethan participated well in class discussions today," Sarah offered, wanting to extend the interaction to observe their dynamic further. Mrs. Peterson mentioned he had some excellent insights during their social studies unit. Michael's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on Ethan's shoulder. "That's my boy, always the little professor." He glanced at his watch. "Well, we should be going. Nice to meet you, Ms. Thompson." As they walked away, Sarah noticed how Ethan's body remained rigid under his stepfather's guiding hand, how carefully he matched his pace to the adult's longer strides. Not the natural movement of a child excited to be going home, but the calculated behavior of someone navigating a minefield. Sarah gathered her belongings quickly and headed for her car. The drive to Cornerstone Cafe took 20 minutes, giving her time to process the chilling interaction she'd just witnessed. Michael Miller was not merely controlling, he was calculating, capable of seamlessly shifting between personas as needed. That made him far more dangerous than someone with poor impulse control. His abuse would be systematic, carefully hidden, and potentially more severe because of the thought put into concealing it. The cafe was moderately busy when Sarah arrived, the after-work crowd stopping for lattes and pastries on their way home. Nancy Winters was already seated in a corner booth, a manila folder on the table beside her coffee cup. She was younger than Sarah had expected, perhaps in her early 30s. With prematurely silver-streaked dark hair and the slightly haunted eyes Sarah recognized in professionals who'd seen too much child suffering. "Thanks for meeting me," Sarah said, sliding into the seat across from her after ordering a coffee at the counter. Nancy glanced around before responding, lowering her voice despite the ambient cafe noise. "I shouldn't be doing this. Technically, I could lose my job for discussing a former student's medical information." "I understand the risk," Sarah assured her, "and I wouldn't have asked if I wasn't seriously concerned about Ethan's welfare." Nancy studied her for a moment before apparently coming to a decision. She slid the manila folder across the table, keeping her hand firmly on top of it. "These are copies of documentation I kept personally, separate from his official school, records which were altered." "Altered?" Sarah repeated, her concern deepening. "Ethan Miller came to my office 17 times during his 4 months at Westfield," Nancy said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "The first few visits were for typical playground scrapes and headaches, But then came the pattern. Stomach pains that prevented participation in PE or swimming, extreme fatigue after weekends, unexplained bruising he wouldn't discuss. She lifted her hand from the folder, allowing Sarah to open it. Inside were meticulous notes similar to Sarah's own documentation, describing a progressive pattern of suspected abuse. Most disturbing were photographs taken during a rare instance when Nancy had convinced Ethan to allow examination. Images showing belt-like bruises across his lower back and what appeared to be cigarette burns on his upper thighs. "My God," Sarah whispered, her worst fears confirmed. "You reported this, surely?" Nancy's bitter laugh contained no humor. 3 times. The first report mysteriously wasn't received by CPS. The second triggered an investigation where Michael Miller presented himself as a concerned stepfather dealing with a troubled child with a history of self-harm. He had documentation from a therapist, later discovered to be his cousin, supporting this claim. And the third report never happened officially. Nancy's voice dropped further. 2 days after I submitted it, I was called to the principal's office. Michael Miller was there with the superintendent and the school board president. Apparently, he donated a significant amount to the district's technology fund the previous year. They had a letter from Ethan's treatment team stating that my interference was disrupting his therapeutic progress. Sarah felt sick. "They shut you down." "Completely. I was told to dispose of my unauthorized medical documentation and informed that any further reports would be considered harassment." A week later, the Millers withdrew Ethan, citing a job transfer. I kept copies of everything against direct orders. Nancy's hands trembled slightly as she sipped her coffee. "I've been documenting similar cases ever since, building a file to take to the state education board about how abuse reports are being suppressed in our district. But it's slow going, and meanwhile, children like Ethan continue suffering," Sarah finished for her. Nancy nodded grimly. "Has he shown you any injuries yet?" "No. He's extremely careful, and Michael seems to have coached him well. But his behavior follows the exact pattern you documented, refusing to change for PE, physical discomfort when sitting, hypervigilance, extreme fear of adult figures, especially males." "The system failed him at Westfield," Nancy said, pushing the folder fully across the table. "Take these, use them. Maybe at a new school, with documentation from 2 separate professionals, someone will finally listen." Sarah placed her hand on the folder, her determination solidifying into resolve. "I've already filed a report with CPS. They're supposed to be investigating, but knowing what happened previously, I'm not confident they'll act quickly enough." "They won't," Nancy confirmed bluntly. "Not if Michael Miller has cultivated the same connections in your district that he had in ours. Men like him know how to work the system. Charitable donations, golf games with the right administrators, carefully constructed medical narratives that paint the child as troubled and themselves as saintly for dealing with it." "Then what would you suggest?" Sarah asked, though she already suspected the answer. Nancy met her gaze directly. "Document everything. Build an airtight case. And find a way to get Ethan to reveal his injuries to someone who can't be influenced by Miller's connections. An emergency room doctor, a police officer called directly to the school, someone outside the educational and social services network. Miller has likely already compromised." Sarah nodded slowly, the weight of what Nancy was suggesting settling on her shoulders. Going outside normal channels carried professional risks, but following protocols had already failed Ethan once. She couldn't let it happen again. "There's something else you should know," Nancy added, her voice barely above a whisper now. "A week before the Millers left our district, Ethan told me something during one of his visits. He said, 'When Michael gets really mad, he uses his special tools.'" When I asked what he meant, he clammed up completely. I never got clarification, but the phrasing haunts me. It suggests something beyond impulsive hitting or beating, something deliberate, ritualized even. Sarah shuddered, thinking of the cigarette burns in Nancy's photographs. Special tools implied premeditation, a calculated approach to causing pain that was infinitely more disturbing than momentary loss of control. "I've never forgiven myself for not finding a way to help him," Nancy admitted, her professional composure cracking slightly. "The night after they withdrew him, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about driving to their house, calling the police directly, something, anything. But by morning, I talked myself into believing the system would work, that my report would be in the system somewhere. It wasn't. This isn't your fault," Sarah said firmly. "You did everything you could within a system designed to protect itself more than the children it serves." "Maybe." Nancy didn't sound convinced. "But Ethan paid the price for my adherence to protocols. Don't make the same mistake, Sarah. These institutions, schools, CPS, even police departments, they're made of people, and people can be influenced, especially by someone with money and connections. Find a way to help him that Michael Miller can't anticipate or control." As they parted ways outside the cafe, Nancy pressed a business card into Sarah's hand. "My personal cell is on the back. Call anytime, day or night. And Sarah, be careful. When I started asking too many questions, someone broke into my car. Nothing was taken, but my files were clearly searched." Sarah drove home in a fog of dread and determination, Nancy's folder securely tucked into her bag. The photographs provided irrefutable evidence of past abuse, but they were months old. To intervene effectively now, she needed current documentation, and that meant finding a way past Ethan's wall of silence and fear. As she pulled into her driveway, Sarah's phone rang. Hannah Reed's name flashed on the screen. "Sarah, thank God you answered. There's something you need to know." Hannah's voice crackled with urgency. "Jessica Miller just called the school after hours. She was trying to reach you, but got the main office voicemail instead. She sounded terrified, said she needs to talk to you about Ethan, but couldn't say more. She left a number and asked you to call tomorrow during school hours when Michael's at work." Sarah's grip tightened on her phone. Did she say what it was about? No details, but she mentioned something about it getting worse, and that she's afraid of what he might do next. "Sarah, this could be the opening we need, if Jessica is ready to cooperate, to confirm the abuse. Or it could be a trap," Sarah countered, her mind racing through possibilities. "Michael confronting me today, now suddenly his wife calls in distress? It seems too convenient. You think he put her up to it? To what end?" "I don't know, but after what Nancy Winters told me today, I'm not taking anything at face value." Sarah made a quick decision. "Text me the number Jessica left. I'll call her, but not from my phone and not at the suggested time. If she's genuine, she'll talk to me whenever she can safely do so. If Michael is manipulating this, we might catch them off guard." After ending the call, Sarah sat in her car, staring at the folder on the passenger seat containing evidence of Ethan's suffering. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. A potential conversation with Jessica Miller, continued observation of Ethan, and the delicate balance of following enough protocol to protect her professional standing while still finding a way to truly help a child. The system had already failed once. One thing was certain: Sarah Thompson would not become another adult who saw Ethan's pain and did nothing. Whatever the professional cost, whatever risk she needed to take, she would find a way to break through the wall of silence surrounding one brave little boy who had endured far too much already. Sarah Thompson sat in her parked car outside a small coffee shop 3 blocks from Oakridge Elementary, her fingers drumming nervously on the steering wheel. The number Hannah had texted her, supposedly Jessica Miller's, was programmed into the prepaid phone she'd purchased on her way home. Yesterday, a necessary precaution after Nancy Winter's warning about Michael Miller's tactics. The digital clock on her dashboard read 7:13 a.m. If Jessica Miller worked retail at Riverside Mall, as Ethan had mentioned, Sarah calculated she might be preparing for work now, possibly alone if Michael had already left for the construction site. Taking a deep breath, Sarah dialed the number. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. Hello? A woman's voice answered, hushed and wary. Jessica Miller, this is Sarah Thompson, the school nurse from Oakridge. I understand you tried to reach me yesterday. Silence stretched across the line for several seconds, then so quietly that Sarah had to strain to hear, I can't talk now. Is Michael there with you? Another pause. No, but I don't have much time. He checks my call history. I understand, Sarah said, keeping her voice calm despite the implication of Jessica being monitored. You wanted to discuss Ethan. Is he in danger, Jessica? A soft, broken sound came through the line, something between a sob and a gasp. I don't know what to do anymore. It's getting worse. Michael's always been strict with discipline, but lately... Her voice trailed off. Lately what, Jessica? Sarah prompted gently. He has these episodes when he's stressed about work or when he drinks. This weekend was bad. Really bad. Jessica's voice shook. Ethan tried to protect me. And Michael. He used the belt. I tried to stop him, but then he turned on me and she broke off abruptly. I shouldn't be saying this. He'll know somehow. He always knows. Sarah's grip tightened on the phone. Jessica, what you're describing is abuse, both of Ethan and yourself. There are resources, safe places you can go. You don't understand, Jessica whispered. He's connected. Police, school board, even some judges. The last time I tried to leave, he found us within hours. Said his friend at the department told him where the women's shelter was located. He said if I ever tried again, he'd make sure. I never saw Ethan again. Sarah processed this information, her concern deepening. Jessica, is Ethan injured right now? Does he need medical attention? I've done what I can at home, put ice on the worst bruises. He says his ribs hurt when he breathes deeply, but Michael would notice if I took him to a doctor. Jessica's voice became even quieter. You can't tell anyone about this call. If CPS shows up or asks questions, he'll know I talked. I've already filed a report, Sarah admitted. It's my legal obligation as a mandated reporter. Jessica's sharp intake of breath was audible. Then we're already in danger. I have to go. I shouldn't have called. Wait, Sarah said urgently. What you've told me confirms what I've been observing. It strengthens the case. If you're willing to make a statement yourself, to document Ethan's injuries, we could get protection orders against Michael immediately. It won't work, Jessica insisted. It didn't last time. The investigators believed everything Michael said, viewed me as an unstable, neglectful mother for allowing the abuse. He's so convincing, so respected in public. Her voice hardened with bitterness. Do you know what he does with all those charity donations everyone praises him for? Buys influence. A new computer lab for the school district means the superintendent takes his calls personally. Sponsoring the police department's youth program means officers look the other way when neighbors report shouting. Sarah felt sick at this calculated manipulation of systems meant to protect children. Jessica, I'm meeting someone today who has evidence from your time at Westfield. If we combine that with current documentation and your testimony... Westfield. Jessica interrupted, her voice hollow. That nurse tried to help too. Nancy something. You know what happened after we left. Michael told me he'd arranged for her to lose her nursing license if she kept pursuing things. Said he knew things about her that could ruin her career. I don't know if it was true, but he was so confident. Nancy Winters, Sarah supplied. She still has her license, and she kept records of Ethan's injuries. She's helping me now. For the first time, a flicker of hope entered Jessica's voice. Really? She's still trying to help us? Yes, and so am I. But Jessica, I need your help too. Is there a safe way for you to document Ethan's current injuries? Photographs, maybe? Michael checks my phone regularly. Jessica fell silent, thinking, but my sister's coming to visit this weekend. She's been worried about us. Michael can't stand her, so he's planning to be working while she's here. If I could use her phone or camera. That would be helpful, Sarah encouraged. And Jessica, if you're ready to leave, there are shelters outside this county, places Michael wouldn't have connections. Maybe, Jessica said, though she sounded unconvinced. I have to go. He sometimes calls the house phone mid-morning to check if I'm home when I'm supposed to be. If I miss his call. The implied threat hung in the air between them. One more thing, Sarah said quickly. Nancy mentioned Ethan once referred to Michael's special tools for punishment. Do you know what that means? Jessica's breathing audibly quickened. I have to go, she repeated, panic edging into her voice. Just watch over Ethan at school, please. The line went dead. Sarah sat motionless, processing the devastating confirmation of her worst fears. Not only was Ethan being abused, but Jessica was a victim as well, both of them trapped in a web of manipulation and violence maintained through Michael Miller's community connections. She glanced at the time, 7:28 a.m. She needed to get to school before the buses arrived, to be there when Ethan stepped off his bus with whatever new injuries his weekend discipline had left him with. But first, she needed to document this conversation while it was fresh in her mind. Opening her notebook, Sarah recorded every detail she could remember. Jessica's statements about the weekend violence, the mention of possible rib injuries, the pattern of Michael using donations. To build influence, Jessica's fear of his connections in law enforcement. When she finished, she tucked the prepaid phone and notebook into her bag and started her car. As she drove to Oakridge Elementary, Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. The CPS report she'd filed was likely working its way through bureaucratic channels, but if Michael Miller truly had the connections Jessica described, it might not lead to immediate intervention. She needed to create documentation that couldn't be ignored or explained away, clear evidence of current injuries. The school parking lot was nearly empty when she arrived, most teachers and staff still 30 minutes from their contract start. Time. Sarah used her key to enter the side door nearest the health office, turning on lights as she went. The quiet emptiness of the building matched her mood, hollow, expectant, waiting. She had just unlocked her office when Hannah Reed appeared. In the doorway, 2 cups of coffee in hand for the second morning in a row. You look like you've seen a ghost, the counselor observed, setting 1 cup on Sarah's desk. What happened? Sarah closed the door before relating her conversation with Jessica Miller. Hannah listened without interruption, her expression growing, increasingly grave. This is worse than we thought, she said when Sarah finished. If Michael Miller has the kind of influence Jessica describes, going through standard channels could put them in more danger. That's what I'm afraid of, Sarah agreed. But I don't see many alternatives. As mandatory reporters, we've done our legal duty by contacting CPS. Anything beyond that edges into questionable territory professionally. Hannah's eyes met hers directly. Sometimes protecting a child requires stepping outside neat professional boundaries, Sarah. You know that as well as I do. Before Sarah could respond, a familiar yellow bus appeared in the drop-off lane outside her window. He's here, she said, watching as Ethan descended the steps with even more care than usual, one arm held protectively against his side. What's your plan? Hannah asked, following her gaze. I need to document his injuries, Sarah replied. Today, if Jessica is right about his ribs, he needs proper medical evaluation anyway. Breathing pain could indicate bruised or even fractured ribs. "He'll never agree to an examination after yesterday," Hannah pointed out. "He ran from my office when we merely suggested it." Sarah watched Ethan make his slow way toward the building entrance. "Then we need to create a situation where saying no isn't an option." She outlined her idea quickly. Hannah's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded. "It's a risk professionally, but I agree it's necessary. I'll back you completely if questions arise later." "Thank you," Sarah said, genuine gratitude in her voice. "I'll set things in motion during first period. Can you be available around 9:30? "Absolutely, whatever you need." When Hannah left, Sarah began preparations, mentally rehearsing each step of her plan. It wasn't without professional risk, but the alternative, sending Ethan back to that house night after night, while paperwork processed through systems compromised by Michael's influence, was unthinkable. The day began with the usual routines: attendance bells, morning announcements, the steady stream of students needing daily medications. Sarah moved through these tasks automatically, one eye on the clock. At precisely 9:15 a.m., she picked up her office phone and dialed Mrs. Peterson's classroom extension. "Marilyn, it's Sarah Thompson. I'm planning a school-wide vision screening for 3rd grade today, starting with your class. Could you send students down to my office in alphabetical order, one at a time? I'll start in about 15 minutes. After receiving confirmation, Sarah contacted the school secretary to announce the vision screening over the PA system, establishing an official record of legitimate health screenings taking place. The secretary sounded mildly confused. Vision screenings were typically scheduled weeks in advance and listed on the school calendar, but Sarah explained it as a last-minute county requirement, and no further questions were asked. At 9:30, the first student arrived for screening. Sarah conducted a genuine vision test, recording results accurately in the child's health record. She repeated this process with the next 4 students, establishing a clear pattern of routine. Medical care. Then, just before Ethan's turn would come alphabetically, she texted Hannah, "Ready? Send in Officer Parker now." Hannah had arranged for Officer James Parker, the school resource officer who divided his time between Oakridge and 2 other elementary schools, to be present today. He was one of the few officers in the district who wasn't native to the area, a recent transfer from a large city department with no connections to local power networks. When Ethan Miller entered her office, his defenses visibly heightened at the sight of the uniformed officer, casually chatting with the school nurse. "Hello, Ethan," Sarah greeted him warmly. "We're doing vision screenings today. Officer Parker is observing some of our health protocols as part of the school safety committee." The officer nodded pleasantly. "Hi there, Ethan. Don't mind me. Just learning how the school health services work." Ethan stood frozen in the doorway, his fight-or-flight response visibly activating. I should go back to class. Mrs. Peterson needs help with This will only take a few minutes," Sarah assured him, gesturing toward the exam chair. "Everyone's doing it today." Reluctantly, Ethan perched on the edge of the chair, his body language screaming discomfort. Sarah noticed how carefully he held himself, minimizing movement of his torso. She conducted the vision test methodically, giving him no reason to suspect alternative motives. As she recorded his results, 20/20 vision in both eyes, she casually noted, "I see you're holding your side, Ethan. Did you get hurt?" The boy stiffened. "No, I'm fine." "You seem to be breathing shallowly," she observed, her clinical training allowing her to notice the subtle signs of someone protecting injured ribs. "Does it hurt when you take a deep breath?" "No," he said, automatically, then winced slightly when he inadvertently demonstrated by taking a deeper breath. Sarah exchanged a glance with Officer Parker, who had been briefed on the situation before arriving. "Ethan," she said gently, "as the school nurse, I need to check any injuries that might affect your participation in school activities. I'd like to look at your side where you're holding it. I can't, Ethan whispered, panic rising in his eyes. I have to go back to class. Officer Parker spoke up, his tone casual but authoritative. You know, Ethan, part of my job is making sure all the kids at school are safe and healthy. Ms. Thompson is concerned that you might have an injury that needs medical attention. I don't, Ethan insisted, his voice rising slightly. I'm fine. I just fell at home. It's nothing. If it's nothing, then there's no reason not to let Nurse Thompson check, right? Officer Parker suggested reasonably. That way she can make sure it's being treated properly and document that you're okay. The word document triggered visible alarm in Ethan's expression. Sarah stepped in smoothly. Ethan, I understand you're uncomfortable, but if you're having pain when breathing, I need to make sure your lungs are clear and that nothing is seriously wrong. It's my responsibility as your school nurse. Trapped between the authority figures and the fear of revealing his injuries, Ethan's composure finally cracked. Tears welled in his eyes. He'll know, he whispered. If you write it down or tell anyone, he'll know, and it'll be worse next time. Sarah knelt to his eye level. Ethan, if someone is hurting you, that's against the law. Officer Parker is here to help make sure you're safe. You don't understand. Ethan's voice cracked. He has friends who are police. He told me that no one would believe me, that they'd think I was lying or hurting myself for attention. Officer Parker's expression hardened slightly, though he maintained his calm demeanor. Ethan, I'm not friends with your stepfather. I moved here from Detroit just 6 months ago. I don't know him at all, and I promise you I take any harm to children very seriously. Something in the officer's straightforward statement seemed to reach Ethan in a way that previous assurances hadn't. He looked between the two adults, weighing his limited options. Finally, with trembling hands, he slowly lifted the edge of his shirt, just high enough to reveal what Sarah had feared. A pattern of angry purple bruising across his lower ribs and side. Sarah maintained her professional composure despite the sick feeling in her stomach. Can you lift it a bit higher, please? I need to see the full extent. When Ethan complied, the full horror became visible. Belt-like bruises in various stages of healing crisscrossed his torso, interspersed with what appeared to be electrical burn marks in a distinctive pattern. Most concerning was the deep bruising along his right rib cage, swollen and discolored in a way that suggested possible fractures. Officer Parker, despite his training, couldn't entirely suppress a sharp intake of breath. Jesus, he muttered, before quickly regaining his professional demeanor. I need to palpate your ribs to check for breaks, Sarah explained gently. It might hurt a bit, but I'll be as careful as I can. As she conducted her examination, Ethan stared fixedly at the wall, silent tears tracking down his cheeks. The marks, she asked softly. The round ones. How were those made, Ethan? For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, so quietly, she almost missed it. His special tool, it's like a stick with metal circles at the end. He heats it up when I've been really bad. Sarah felt her professional control waver at this confirmation of calculated, premeditated torture of a child. She caught Officer Parker's eye over Ethan's head, seeing her own horror reflected there. Ethan, the officer said carefully, what you're describing is very serious child abuse. No adult has the right to hurt you like this, no matter what rules. You might have broken, but he says it's discipline, Ethan mumbled, that I need it to learn respect. This isn't discipline, Sarah said firmly. This is a crime, and we're going to make sure it stops today. Sarah completed her examination, documenting every injury with clinical precision, while Officer Parker took photographs with a department-issued camera. Ethan submitted to the process with the resigned compliance of a child who had long ago learned that resistance only brought more pain. When they finished, Sarah gently helped Ethan replace his shirt. You have at least 2 bruised ribs, possibly cracked. You need proper medical evaluation with x-rays, which means a trip to the hospital. Fear flashed across Ethan's face. I can't. Michael won't be involved, Officer Parker interrupted firmly. Based on what I've seen, I'm initiating an emergency protective custody order. That means you'll be placed somewhere safe while we investigate, and your stepfather won't be allowed contact with you. What about my mom? Ethan asked, a hint of desperate hope in his voice. She tries to stop him sometimes, but he hurts her too. Officer Parker and Sarah exchanged glances. We'll make sure your mom is offered protection too, the officer assured him. But right now, we need to focus on getting you proper medical care. Is there anything else you can tell us that would help us understand what's been happening at home? Ethan hesitated, then reached for his backpack with shaking hands. From the inner pocket, he withdrew a small, battered notebook. I write things down sometimes, he admitted, when they happen, so I don't forget or think I imagined it. I keep it hidden in the air vent in my room. Sarah accepted the notebook with a sense of both triumph and dread. Documentation, in Ethan's own words, would be powerful evidence, but the contents would undoubtedly reveal horrors she wasn't fully prepared to face. You're very brave, Ethan, she told him, meaning every word. What you've done today will help keep you safe, and it might help other kids too. As Officer Parker stepped into the hallway to call for backup and arrange hospital transport, Sarah sat beside Ethan, allowing him to lean against her when the exhaustion of fear and disclosure finally overwhelmed his rigid self-control. What happens now? He asked, his voice small but steadier than before. You'll go to the hospital to get your ribs checked properly, Sarah explained. Officer Parker will arrange for a special detective who works with children to talk with you. Then you'll go to what's called a temporary placement, a safe home with people trained to take care of kids who need a secure place to stay. Will I have to go to court? Will Michael be there? Sarah chose her words carefully. There will probably be court hearings, but you won't have to be in the same room as Michael. There are special procedures to protect children during these processes. Ethan absorbed this information, his analytical mind working through implications despite his physical and emotional exhaustion. What about school? My stuff at home, my books? We'll make arrangements for your schoolwork, Sarah assured him. And the police can get your essential belongings from home when it's safe to do so. Before Ethan could ask more questions, Hannah appeared in the doorway, her expression a mixture of concern and relief. Dr. Davis is on her way, she warned. The secretary told her about the unscheduled vision screening and she wants to know what's going on. Officer Parker returned, accompanied by a female officer Sarah didn't recognize. This is Detective Martinez from Special Victims, he explained. She'll be taking over Ethan's case and coordinating with hospital personnel. Detective Martinez, a compact woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, knelt to introduce herself to Ethan. Hello there. I understand you've had a rough time, but you're being very brave. I'm here to make sure you stay safe from now on. As the detective spoke with Ethan, Officer Parker pulled Sarah and Hannah aside. I've contacted my supervisor directly, bypassing local dispatch. We're executing this as an emergency action based on imminent danger to a minor. That means we don't need to wait for CPS approval, though they've been notified. What about the hospital? Sarah asked. If Michael Miller has the connections Jessica described, we're taking him to Mercy General in the next county, Parker confirmed. Martinez has contacts there who understand the sensitivity of these cases. They'll limit information in the computer system to prevent Miller from locating Ethan if he tries. The conversation paused as Principal Davis appeared in the doorway. her expression shifting from administrative annoyance to grave concern as she absorbed the scene. Police officers, a clearly traumatized child, and the grim faces of her school staff. "What's happening here?" she asked, her voice hushed. Officer Parker stepped forward. "Dr. Davis, we're executing an emergency protective custody order for Ethan Miller based on clear evidence of severe physical abuse. Nurse Thompson identified and documented multiple injuries consistent with prolonged, systematic maltreatment." Dr. Davis paled slightly. "I'd like to speak with you privately," she began, but Parker cut her off politely but firmly. "With respect, Dr. Davis, our priority is getting this child to medical care. There will be time for administrative discussions later. Right now, I need to know if the school has emergency contact information for Jessica Miller, the child's mother." Recognizing the shift in authority, Dr. Davis provided the requested information. She works at Carson's department store at Riverside Mall. The emergency card lists her direct line at the cosmetics counter. "Thank you," Detective Martinez said, making a note. "We'll need to contact her immediately as there may be domestic violence concerns as well." As preparations continued for Ethan's transport to the hospital, Sarah knelt beside him once more. "I'll check on you later," she promised. "Is there anything you need right now before you go?" Ethan thought for a moment, then asked in a small voice, "Could I bring my book, the one I was reading this morning?" "Of course," Sarah said, touched by this simple childhood request amidst such trauma. "I'll get it from your classroom." As she hurried to Mrs. Peterson's room to retrieve Ethan's book, Sarah's mind raced with all that had happened and all that was still to come. The investigation, potential criminal charges, custody hearings, therapy for Ethan. A long road stretched ahead, but most importantly, tonight, Ethan would sleep somewhere safe, free from terror for the first time in who knew how long. When she returned with the book, a dog-eared copy of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Ethan accepted it with a whispered thank you that contained more genuine emotion than she'd heard from him since his arrival at Oakridge. "You're going to be okay," she told him as Detective Martinez prepared to escort him to the waiting ambulance. "It won't be easy, but you're not alone anymore." As Ethan walked away, his small hand trustingly in the detective's, Sarah felt the weight of the past weeks lifting slightly. Whatever professional consequences might come from her actions today, she had no regrets. Some lines were worth crossing when a child's safety hung in the balance. The remainder of the school day passed in a blur of administrative meetings, detailed reports, and careful documentation. Dr. Davis, to her credit, offered full support. Once she understood the severity of the situation, expressing shock and dismay that she hadn't recognized the signs herself. "Michael Miller was so charming, so concerned about Ethan's education," she murmured during one meeting. "He'd already offered to fund a new computer lab, like he did at Westfield." "Buying influence," Hannah replied bluntly. "Creating a network of people who would see him as a benefactor rather than an abuser." By late afternoon, Sarah received word that Jessica Miller had been located at work and taken to a separate hospital for her own injuries. Apparently, Michael's weekend rage hadn't been directed solely at Ethan. She had given a preliminary statement confirming the pattern of abuse and expressing willingness to cooperate fully with prosecution. At 4:30 p.m., just as Sarah was preparing to leave for the day, her office phone rang. "Health Office, Nurse Thompson speaking." "Sarah, it's Officer Parker. I thought you should know. We executed a search warrant at the Miller residence about an hour ago. We found the special tool Ethan described." His voice contained barely suppressed anger. "It's a modified cattle prod, designed to leave precise, circular burns. It was hidden in a locked cabinet in the garage workshop, along with other implements." Sarah closed her eyes briefly, absorbing this confirmation of calculated torture. "What about Michael Miller? Has he been arrested?" "Not yet. He wasn't at the construction site where he supposedly works. His company says he called in sick today, but hasn't been seen. We've got an APB out, but... Parker hesitated. I wanted to warn you. Given what we know about his personality type and the evidence we found at the house, he may pose a threat to those he perceives as responsible for his exposure. That includes you. A chill ran through Sarah. You think he might come after me? It's a possibility we're taking seriously. There will be increased patrols around the school and your home address. Detective Martinez has assigned an officer to remain at the hospital with Ethan as a precaution. I'd advise you to be vigilant until he's in custody. After ending the call, Sarah sat motionless, processing this new dimension of danger. Michael Miller wasn't merely an abuser. He was potentially a calculating predator, now backed into a corner. The thought was unsettling, but it didn't diminish her certainty that she'd done the right thing. As she gathered her belongings to leave, Anna appeared in her doorway. Just heard from Detective Martinez. Ethan's ribs are definitely cracked, but fortunately no displacement requiring surgical intervention. They're keeping him overnight for observation and pain management. Sarah nodded, relieved the injuries weren't worse, but still angry they existed at all. Has he been told about his mother? Yes. Apparently he was concerned she'd go back to Michael if given the chance. The detective assured him they're doing everything possible to help Jessica understand her options for permanent separation. And Michael is still at large, Sarah added, sharing Parker's warning. Hannah's expression tightened. I don't like that. Not one bit. You shouldn't go home alone tonight, Sarah. Why don't you stay at my place until they find him? I appreciate the offer, but I can't let fear dictate my life, Sarah replied, though the suggestion was tempting. The police are aware of the situation. They'll be watching. After Hannah reluctantly departed, Sarah completed her final documentation of the day's events. As she wrote, she found herself returning to a single moment, Ethan's face when Officer Parker had stated simply that he would take any harm to children seriously. The dawning hope in the boy's eyes had been simultaneously heartbreaking and affirming. After being conditioned to believe no adult would help him, that single statement of uncomplicated protection had reached him. The school building was nearly empty when Sarah finally left her office, the hallways eerily quiet after the day's dramatic events. She walked to her car with the heightened awareness Parker's warning had instilled, keys gripped tightly in her hand. As she approached her vehicle, she noticed something on the windshield, a plain white envelope tucked under the wiper blade. Sarah stopped several feet away, sudden apprehension coursing through her. There was no name written on the envelope, no identifying marks of any kind. Fighting the urge to simply run back into the building, Sarah forced herself to think logically. If Michael Miller wanted to threaten her, would he leave a note? More importantly, if she left the envelope untouched, would it be there tomorrow, or would rain or wind carry away what might be important evidence? Decision made, she approached carefully, using a tissue from her pocket to lift the envelope, without touching it directly. Inside was a single sheet of paper containing 5 typed words. You will regret interfering today. Sarah's heartbeat accelerated as she scanned the parking lot, suddenly feeling exposed and vulnerable. She hurried back into the building, envelope held carefully by its edges, and called the non-emergency police number from the front office phone. Within 15 minutes, Officer Parker had returned to the school, evidence bag in hand. This was definitely left after our patrol passed through an hour ago, he noted, examining the envelope without touching it. We'll check for prints and see if we can pull surveillance footage from the school cameras. Do you think it's from Michael Miller? Sarah asked, though the answer seemed obvious. It seems likely, Parker confirmed grimly. "This changes things, Sarah. A direct threat means we need to take additional precautions. I'm going to arrange for an officer to escort you home and maintain surveillance overnight." As they waited for the additional police presence to arrive, Sarah called Hannah to update her. "You were right," she admitted. "I shouldn't be alone tonight. After the officer drops me home, would you mind coming over? I'd feel better with company." "Already unpacking an overnight bag," Hannah assured her. "I'll bring dinner too. And Sarah, you did the right thing today. No matter what happens next, remember that." The police escort followed Sarah home, an officer remaining parked outside her small bungalow after checking that the house was secure. Hannah arrived shortly after, carrying Chinese takeout and an overnight bag. As they ate dinner, Sarah found herself repeatedly checking the windows, jumping at small sounds. "This isn't how I expected today to end," she admitted, setting down her barely touched food. "I knew there would be professional ramifications, paperwork, possibly even criticism from administration. But I never thought I'd be hiding in my own home, afraid of a man I've barely met." "It's the risk we sometimes take," Hannah replied soberly. "When you interfere with an abuser's control, they often redirect their rage toward whoever they perceive as the threat. The fact that Miller is making threats suggests Ethan's disclosure was a serious blow to his power." Sarah nodded, finding grim satisfaction in that perspective. "I'd do it again, even knowing this would happen. You should have seen Ethan's face when he realized he was actually going to be safe, Hannah. When he understood adults were finally going to protect him instead of hurt him." "That moment is why we do this work," Hannah agreed. "Despite the bureaucracy, the system failures, the personal risks, that moment makes it worthwhile." Sarah was about to respond when her phone rang, an unknown number lighting up the screen. She answered cautiously. "Ms. Thompson, this is Detective Martinez. I wanted to update you personally. Michael Miller has been located and taken into custody." Relief flooded through Sarah. "Where was he?" "At a motel near the interstate, apparently preparing to flee the state. He had cash, fake identification, and a one-way bus ticket to Arizona." Martinez paused. "He also had a loaded firearm and your home address written in his notebook. Officer Parker's concerns about your safety were well-founded." Sarah sank into her couch, the full impact of the danger she'd been in washing over her. "Is he talking, confessing?" "Quite the opposite. He's claiming Ethan self-harms for attention and that you and Jessica conspired to frame him due to personal animosity. But the physical evidence is overwhelming. The injuries, the torture implement, Ethan's journal, and now Jessica's statement as well." Martinez's voice hardened. "The district attorney is preparing multiple felony charges. He won't be released on bail, given the flight risk and threatening behavior." After the call ended, Sarah sat in stunned silence, processing how narrowly she had avoided a potentially deadly confrontation. Hannah squeezed her hand supportively. "It's over," Sarah said finally. "At least the immediate danger." "For you and for Ethan," Hannah agreed, "though his healing journey is just beginning." Later that night, as Hannah slept in the guest room, Sarah found herself unable to rest despite her exhaustion. She sat by her living room window, watching the occasional car pass her house, thinking about Ethan in his hospital bed. Was he sleeping peacefully, perhaps for the first time in years? Was he still afraid, uncertain about his future? Had anyone thought to leave a light on, knowing how terrifying darkness could be for a child who had endured what he had? Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. "Detective Martinez again. Thought you'd want to know. Ethan asked if he could go back to Oakridge Elementary after discharge. Said there were people there who helped him when no one else would. You've made a difference that will last his lifetime." Tears blurred Sarah's vision as she read the message. All the professional risks, the threat to her personal safety, the emotional toll of confronting such calculated cruelty, all of it faded against this single confirmation that somewhere in the darkness, a light had been lit that could not be extinguished. Tomorrow there would be more statements to give, reports to file, possibly even inquiries about her methods. The administrative machinery would grind forward, analyzing whether protocols had been followed, whether lines had been crossed. But tonight, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that she had done the only thing that truly mattered. She had seen a child's silent plea for help and had refused to look away. In the hospital across town, an 8-year-old boy who had once been afraid to change his clothes for gym class slept under the watchful protection of systems finally working as they should, his treasured book on the bedside table, his future no longer defined by fear and pain. And in her quiet living room, a school nurse who had trusted her instincts, despite pressure to ignore them, finally allowed herself to rest, knowing that sometimes the most important healing begins with simply paying attention to what others refuse to see. Up next, you got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.